Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. This is the last in our series of regional town halls, and we're really excited to have you here tonight. My name's Vicky. I'm the Leadership Contest Coordinator for the Green Party, and I just wanted to let you know quickly that we will be recording tonight's sessions so that people who aren't here are able to watch this later. And also, there are not going to be any live questions taken tonight because there were so many submitted in advance. But we do encourage you to join in the conversation on Twitter. You can use the hashtags GPC, CDN, Poli, and the other leadership contest. And you can also get a discussion going in our volunteer Slack workspace if you're on that. So without further ado, I will turn things over to our moderators. We're really lucky to have Mike Schreiner here with us tonight, of course, the first Green elected in Ontario. So thank you so much for joining us and moderating this, as well as Roberta Herod, CEO for the Peterborough Kawartha EDA. So thanks again, and over to you.
So good evening, everyone. I'm Mike Schreiner, the MPP for Guelph and the leader of the Green Party of Ontario. And I want to thank each and every one of you for joining us tonight. And before we begin, I just want to take a moment to acknowledge that Ontario is home to many First Nation, Métis, and Inuit peoples. And I'm in Guelph, which is on Treaty 3 lands of the Mississaugas of the Credit, and we're just up the river from the Haldimand Tract Treaty lands of 6 nations. And as a settler, I want to just express my deep gratitude for Indigenous peoples for teaching us how to care for this land and water, how to care for the 2-legged, the 4-legged, the feathered, the finned, the rooted and non-rooted amongst us. And to just take a moment to reflect on the land that you're located on, and to express my desire that we as a party work together to care for this place for the next 7 generations. So I am honored to be one of the co-moderators, and I'm incredibly excited to have a fantastic other co-moderator in Roberta Herod, who will outline the format for tonight's town hall.
Thank you, Mike. We're really pleased that so many of you have chosen to join us. We have a big crowd here tonight. This is an important marker in Canadian Green Party history, so your participation in this type of grassroots politics is very important, and a recognition of how seriously you take your role as an informed voter as we choose the next Green Party leader. We're excited to be witness to this. We have 9 contestants who are extremely diverse in their qualifications, and each one of them is a testament to the intelligence, the grit, and the integrity of the Green Party movement in Canada and as a whole. We expect this town hall to be lively, and we expect it to be a respectful event. The questions each contestant will be asked reflect the distilled essence of over 160 questions we received. We grouped the questions into themes and took your concerns to build open-ended questions with the hopes of eliciting the most educated and educating answers possible from each contestant. We are here to learn why each of these contestants should lead the Green Party of Canada and the country after a successful federal election. We will start with 1-minute introductions from each contestant, followed by the questions from your moderators, and end with summary closing statements. Each contestant will have 1 minute to respond to the question, and as they get close to their 1-minute allotment, Aaron, who I think is out in BC, will signal to us that they have 5 seconds to wrap it up, and then we will move on to the next leadership hopeful. Each contestant will have 3 30-second rebuttal opportunities over the course of the evening, and these rebuttals can be used at any time. We will mix up the order of who answers each question first, and this should easily fill the 90 minutes. One last note, if your question is not asked, we encourage you to attend the candidate-hosted events. You can find the details of those by logging into the greenparty.ca and going to the leadership contest, and you'll see the links with the bios and the donation links. So with that in mind, let's get started. We will start this first question with Miriam Haddad. Tell us why we should vote for you. Oh, Mike?
Do introductions. They have their opening statement.
Sorry. Let's do the introductions. Yeah, I didn't have that on my. So the first, the opening statement comes from David Murner first, please.
Thank you very much, Roberta. Thank you, Mike, and thank you for everybody who's organized this event. It's great to be back with these great candidates again. We're getting to know each other really well after Zoom call together. I'm coming to you from Saanich, British Columbia, the traditional territory of the Wisanic, the Sauk, the Songhees, the Sequim, the Esquimalt First Nations. And I don't say that as just a matter of routine. I went into law to address injustices to Indigenous people. Through legislation and litigation. It's been a big part of my life, and I believe firmly that the Green Party can make a huge difference on Indigenous justice. I'd love to answer any questions people have. I live here with my wife, Annemiek, and my youngest daughter, Rebecca, who's going into grade 12. My other 3 daughters have moved on. J'aimerais dire à tout le monde que je pense que notre parti est un parti bilingue. Notre pays est un pays bilingue, et c'est très, très important pour nous d'avoir un leader qui est parfaitement bilingue. Folks might wonder, what are my relationships to Ontario? And I have deep roots in Ontario. Went to high school in Ontario. I did my law school at the University of Toronto.
Your time's up. We're going to have to move on.
And I'm looking forward to the questions. Thank you.
Our next contestant is Judy Green.
Hi, thank you all for making this possible, and it's great to be on this panel with these amazing fellow contestants. I'm Judy Green. I'm the only Atlantic Canadian contestant, and I come to you from Mi'kma'ki, which is the unceded territory of the Mi'kmaq. And here we're governed under the Peace and Friendship Treaty, and I remind people that that means that we both, settlers and First Nations each, have rights and responsibilities under that treaty. And we really try to live up to that here. I have lived in 5 provinces across Canada, and I have did my master's in computer science actually in Ottawa at Carleton University. Lived in Carleton Place, just outside of Ottawa, and have many family members who are currently living in Ontario. So I've spent a lot of time in Ontario. We are now in Nova Scotia, the home where my husband lives, and we're very proud to be representing Nova Scotia in this leadership race. And I hope to get to know all of you much better. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next contestant is Andrew West, please.
Hello, everyone. The acknowledgement that I would like to make is to say that Ontario Power Generation wants to find a place to dump nuclear waste. And in this area, which is where I am right now, the Saugeen Ojibwe Nation has stood up and said no to it. But they're still looking for a place, and it still might be in this territory, but they're also looking for other territories, and it might be on Indigenous people's land. So that's something we need to pay attention to. I am running in this leadership race because I want the Green Party to win. I have been a 4-time candidate here in Ontario. I've been on the shadow cabinet since 2015 as the Attorney General critic. And I want to keep this party in the center. The climate crisis requires all hands on deck. So I want to make sure that we are a broad party, that we bring in voters who are disenfranchised with the Liberals and the NDP, but also who are disenfranchised with the Conservatives. And there's lots in this riding: family farmers, conservationists. If we put forward a fiscally responsible option, along with our great policies, we can and will get elected. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good. Thanks.
Our next contestant to speak is Miriam Haddad.
So good evening. Good evening, everyone. I don't know, can you hear me now? Okay, sorry about that. So good evening, everyone. I am in Tiohtià:ke, unceded territory of the Mohawk Nation, also known as Montreal. I'm running to be the next leader of the Green Party because it is time for change. I decided to run this year because people like me are often just left out of the conversation. I'm 32, a socialist. I am also a lesbian and immigrant. It is time for us to lead the way and be at the forefront of Canadian politics. Young people have started to mobilize. They are turning out to vote in higher numbers more than ever. Imagine what we could do if our leader looks just like them. I look forward to speaking to you tonight about my vision for the Green Party and the Green New Deal. Thank you.
Thank you. And next up is Amita Kutner, please.
Thank you. I'm speaking with you all today from unceded Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh territory in British Columbia, and I'm absolutely thrilled, so thank you so much for having me. I am beyond honored as well to be presenting a collective vision for our party and our country that is centered around justice, credibility, and preparedness. Equity, decolonization, and science are going to be crucial lenses through which we develop policy about issues throughout Canada. And as we face the era of crises that we are in, the climate crisis, the mental health crisis, and the inequality crisis are all personal to me, given my experience of losing my mother and home to a mudslide in 2005. As the fires, floods, and tornadoes appear with more frequency, I am here to help everyone prepare and respond. This is the perfect moment to have a scientist, an astrophysicist, to communicate and inspire, and someone who has been through climate disaster, so we have a trauma-informed approach. I'm looking forward to the discussion tonight. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Glenn Murray, you are up next.
Thank you very much and welcome everyone. Thank you so much for coming out. I'm speaking to you from Treaty 1 territory in Winnipeg and also the capital, the original capital of the Métis First Nation. I have been involved in politics. I've chaired the National Roundtable on the Environment and the Economy, advising 2 prime ministers, chairing a plenary of business and environmental leadership across the country. I've been mayor of a large city, chaired the Big City Mayor's Caucus, held senior portfolios in Ontario. Je suis né à Montréal et mes premières expériences politiques, c'est comme militant pour le Rassemblement des citoyens de Montréal. Sachez que je veux travailler à réimaginer un Canada socialement juste, où les gens et les communautés prospèrent, parce que les décisions gouvernementales, celles des entreprises et des corporations sont guidées par des principes écologiques. And that is important because I really believe that the most important decisions are made locally. Confronting racism and re-empowering people means that we have to relocalize decision-making. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. They have this down pat. They all know exactly what a minute is. Anna, you are up next, please.
Thank you so much. It's such a pleasure to welcome the other candidates to Ontario, and it's a pleasure to be with everyone tonight. My name is Annemie. I am a former candidate in the riding of Toronto Centre, a former critic for the party in international affairs. I'm a lawyer and social entrepreneur. I'm a very proud resident of Toronto. One of the reasons that I ran in the last election is because I believe so much in the future of the Green Party in Ontario. I believe that the Green Party needs another base in addition to the fantastic ones that it has, and that Ontario has all of the right elements to be the next powerhouse base for the Green Party of Canada. The Green Party is absolutely needed at this time, more than ever, because of the challenges that we've been facing. And we get there by being the most diverse, democratic, and daring party in Canadian politics. I'm really excited to talk with you about that this evening, and I welcome the discussion.
Thank you. Dimitri, you are up next, please.
Thank you. I come to you from Montreal and the unceded lands of the Kanien'kehá:ka Nation. I'm a lawyer, journalist, and activist. I was born and raised in London, Ontario, and after graduating from the University of Toronto Faculty of Law, I worked as a corporate lawyer on Wall Street and in Paris, France. As a corporate lawyer, I saw firsthand how the powerful bend the legal system to their will. I left Wall Street with that knowledge in hand, returned home and built Canada's largest team of securities class actions lawyers at the law firm of Siskins with offices in London, Toronto, and Quebec City. My team recovered $500 million from major corporations, including the Chinese National Petroleum Corporation and SNC-Lavalin. As a result of those efforts, Canadian Business Magazine named me in 2013 as one of the 50 most influential persons in Canadian business. I'm not a career politician, lawyer, journalist, and activist instead, and I have seen how the political establishment has coddled the corporate sector. I'm determined to bring to an end that cozy relationship. The time is now for a transformational agenda. That agenda will be fiercely opposed by the corporate sector, and as leader, I will fight to overcome that opposition. Thank you.
Thank you. And Courtney Howard, last but not least.
Thank you. I'm speaking from Yellowknife. This is the traditional territory of the Yellowknives Dene and the North Slave Métis. I'm an emergency doctor here, and this is one of the most rapidly warming places on the planet. We're 2.5 degrees Celsius warmer than we were when an 80-year-old elder was born, and I serve a patient population that extends up to the high Arctic, where they're already 3 degrees Celsius warmer. So as a physician, we have the obligation, in fact, to advocate for public policy on behalf of our patient population. And that's why I started doing research on wildfires and advocacy at the intersection of health and the environment. So I'm one of the most well-recognized experts on climate change and health in Canada and internationally. I've worked, I'm the president on a leave of absence of the Canadian Association of Physicians for the Environment, which I've helped to build up over a decade into what I believe is one of the most effective small NGOs in Canada. And I'm actually also taking a leave of absence from a World Health Organization advocacy post. I believe we're in the middle of a pandemic, which is a crisis of planetary health. It will be very much a time when people are looking for a plan that prioritizes health, shows a path to health and safety for the kids going forward. I've been working on policies like that for a decade, and I can bring that to the Green Party.
Thanks. So Mike, I think I will start the question and you get the second one, okay? Your first question is about your leadership philosophy, plans, and your leadership style. We'll start with Miriam. So Miriam, tell us why we should vote for you, highlighting your leadership philosophy and your plans for the Green Party going forward.
I want to build a movement. We need to give more power to the grassroots and respect our core value of participatory democracy. The other thing that I do is make sure that I surround myself with people who are smarter than me. I see this as a really important part of being a leader. I'm not an expert in many things, but I always listen to the experts. As a leader, I want to make sure that I am sharing our message clearly. We need to speak outside our bubble and make our messages accessible and understandable to all voters. I want to bring change and political courage to Canadian politics. We have the most progressive platform. We now need to make people dream and to see that a Green New Deal will change everyone's life for the good. We need to stand for the many and not the few. Thank you.
Thank you. Glenn, the same question, please.
Yeah, I think a leader isn't someone who tries to speak for everyone. A leader is someone who lifts up others' voices. I've often equate being leader of the Green Party to being a mayor of a city, which I was, where you have no particular affiliation of party. You're elected by everybody, which the leader of the Green Party is, but your efficacy is your ability to listen to people and ensure that they're heard. I would meet with every single member of my council. I worked out a priorities plan with every member of the team. Everyone would see the fingerprints on that. And I think that's true. I think that we have to structure effective communication to hear from EDAs. I'm hoping that whoever is elected, if it's fortunate enough to me, one of the first things I would do is sit down with the other 8 leadership candidates and our caucus and start to saying, how can you most effectively affect change? But I also think the ability to win elections is important. And I think I bring an incredible amount of success in that. As a young gay kid who established Nine Circles Health Center, who was out, I managed to get myself elected to city council and then mayor against great odds. So I think I bring a lot of ability, a winnability in my experience, which I think the Greens need. And I think that would be another hallmark of my leadership. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Annemie, you're next.
Thank you so much. I think that my style was on display in the last election when I ran for the Greens in Toronto Centre. It was really about collaboration and cooperation with as many Greens across the GTA as possible. Whenever there was an opportunity to bring in Greens to share our office, to share our resources, to create events together, we always made sure to do that. And that's the style I want to bring to my leadership of the Green Party. I'm also someone who is very much, I lead by trying to create things where they didn't exist before that will help to uplift people. And so I co-created the 1834 Fellowship recently, which is training a whole new generation of young Black public policy leaders. I created the Canadian Centre for Political Leadership, which helped elect many new underrepresented groups to Canadian politics. And so it's really about building capacity, amplifying voices, and really helping others to succeed as well.
Thank you. David, your turn.
Thank you, Roberta. My main quality is that I'm a listener, a builder, and a uniter. I'm also a very, very hard worker, and I hope to replace Elizabeth May as the hardest worker in federal politics. I campaigned for 2 weeks for Mike Schreiner in Guelph before he won. I've traveled the country from coast to coast. I'm the only candidate in this race who's worked on green campaigns from Atlantic Canada to British Columbia, winning green campaigns federally, provincially, and municipally. I love campaigning. I love the hard work of politics. Barack Obama says politics is 90% perspiration, 10% inspiration, and I totally get that. It's about hard work. The other thing I'd say is I believe I'm the kind of person who can pull together this fantastic team of candidates, get us all to work together. If everyone here won their seat, we would transform Canadian politics. And that's how I would love to serve as leader, by building others up. Thank you.
Thank you. Courtney.
Thank you. And it's fun just listening to everybody else's qualities, and we've seen these exhibited. I am a physician, and my desire to create change in the world is based on wanting people to have good lives. I am a compassionate leader, but I'm very focused and I'm very action-oriented. Emergency medicine comes with a certain degree of impatience. I like to make people better within the time window available to create that change. And in the timelines we face right now with climate change, I think that that's important. I can be focused, I can get things done. Meanwhile, I've had a lot of teaching roles, and I love that. I love seeing what people can bring to a situation. Many people lack the confidence that we can help instill in them with some skill building, with some education, with support. And I think that's really been key to the change I've been able to create with CAPE. We now have chapters in BC, Ontario, Quebec, and one building in the East, and they're all creating incredible change. I love working with medical students, and I think that combination of focus and the ability to steward others can help me really lead this well.
Thank you. And Dimitri.
Thanks, Roberta. My approach to leadership would be to really elevate the whole principle of participatory democracy to a whole new level, and act at all times as though I am the spokesperson of the party's members, first and foremost, not the star, not somebody who dictates to the party members, not someone who decides unilaterally how issues of public importance and electoral strategy will be formulated and implemented, but someone who is there to give voice to the will of the members. And I would like to see that reflected in a variety of ways. I would like to see a shadow cabinet that is directly elected by the members of the party. I would like to see the deputy leaders directly elected by the members of the party. I would like to see the electoral strategy formulated by a national electoral platform committee, which would be fully represented by the various regions of the country, and would play more than a sort of advisory role, but actually have the final say on what the party's platform will be. And that platform at the end of the day would have to be fully consistent with the member-approved policies of the party. At the same time, I would be the voice of the party in a fearless way, as I have been as a lawyer, and ensure that no matter what the resistance to our agenda, that it will be implemented.
Our next speaker is Judy. Same question, please.
Thank you. My tagline is leadership from the ground up. I am grassroots driven, and my most effective leadership experiences have always been when I provide the supports, the structure, and the passion to really motivate people to go outside their comfort zone and grow into leadership roles. My most successful positions have always been ones where I've had somebody prepared to take over for me. I don't hold on to power. I don't let ego get in the way. We're about focusing on shared goals and moving towards getting there, using the best tools and opportunities available. As leader of the Green Party, I represent the people, the membership, and their values and the policies that are designed by members. I want more membership involvement in our party. I want an ongoing process for creating policy, and I just want us all to be working together. Thank you.
Thank you. Andrew, you're the second last.
Thank you. I'm respectful and I lead by example. And maybe the best way to share the example of this is to tell you a call that I had earlier this week or last week with a member. And he told a story that I've heard before, which is they only going to vote for someone who has elected experience and a high profile. And my response to that was, yeah, that is something, and that's a certain type of experience. And I have been asked to join other parties, and I could have joined other parties, gained a high profile, and come to the Green when there was an opportunity to do so. But I decided to join the party to help build it from the ground up. When I joined, there was just one MLA and one MP across Canada. And as a Green, I've ran as a candidate 4 times. I've been a member of the shadow cabinet. I've drafted proposals that's helped grow this party. I've helped plan AGMs across provincially and for other riding associations. I've co-chaired plenary many times. I've emceed the gala dinner for an AGM. I've done interviews. I've always been there for the Green Party when they've needed me. I've even postponed this leadership campaign so I could run in a by-election, which was an almost virtual no-win. And in that campaign, we over doubled the Green Party vote, and it was the best that the Green Party's ever done in that riding ever. So when you vote for me, you get sacrifice and integrity.
Thank you. And lastly, Amita.
Thank you. I believe that the philosophy of leadership is really what this race is about. Policy, in the end, will be member-driven, even if facilitated by the leader. The leader also doesn't stand alone, especially if they collaborate well. So it's about communication and how we connect. I believe in consensus, in sharing power, in creating space, and helping others become empowered. I communicate from the heart, from my varied experience, and I hide nothing. I am here by necessity and for service. My philosophy is compassion, clarity, balance, and kindness. We must be courageous and radically honest in order to bring our party and our democracy to being truly representative and welcoming. I have experience in communication and bringing people together from disparate sides. I look forward to using these as leader to help us grow. We are our collective strength and not just individuals. Thank you.
Thank you. Over to you, Mike.
Thanks, everyone. As you can all imagine, we had a lot of questions about the environment. So Premier Ford has dismantled Ontario's climate plans and reduced environmental protections. Premier Horgan wants more LNG. Premiers Kinney and Moe are pushing pipelines. So what is your view on how the federal government should interact with provinces that are rolling back environmental protections and do not have a climate plan that meets our Paris commitments? And David, you're up first this time.
Thank you, Mike. I appreciate that very much. I do believe that we have to respect federal and provincial jurisdictions, but the federal government has a huge role here because the federal government has environmental jurisdiction under our Constitution. And I think one of the things that the federal government needs to do is lead by example. We have huge spending power in the federal government. Let's build an east-west electrical grid. Let's connect it up to renewable power. Let's make sure that we have the largest job creation in enterprise in Canadian history should be uniting our country through this east-west grid. If we lead by example federally, if we have a positive story about how we brought in the carbon fee and dividend, applied it across the country, we'll be able to get around the provincial premiers who are dragging their feet and dragging Canada down. I'm really a strong believer in leading by example. The Green Party platform in 2019 was great. Let's push it hard in the next election and show the way for the provincial premiers. Thank you.
Thank you. Dimitri, you're next.
In 2015, shortly after Justin Trudeau was first elected to power, I participated in action in Ottawa, the Climate Welcome, organized by 350.org, and just by chance ran into Catherine McKenna and her chief of staff, Marlo Reynolds, as I was going home. And we got into this big debate about whether the federal government had the jurisdiction to impose a carbon tax. And they were raising questions about whether that jurisdiction even existed. I argued forcefully that it does. And eventually they did in fact adopt a carbon tax. David's quite right. The federal government has large jurisdiction to impose minimum environmental standards across the nation for the protection of our environment. This is a matter of peace, order, and good government. It is also a matter that is touched upon by other heads of power of the federal government. So we should actually impose minimum environmental standards, whether it comes to the protection of our forest lands, whether it comes to the protection of our water systems across the country, and ensure that they cannot be lowered beneath that standard. Naomi Klein has talked about disaster capitalism. We are watching that in action in Ontario and elsewhere in this country as the pandemic is used to gut environmental regulation.
Thanks. Andrew, you're next. You'll have to unmute.
Yeah, thanks. I agree with what's been said that Canada does have the jurisdiction to put in a nationwide fee and dividend program. And that's what should have been done, rather than this patchwork to try to just pass off, to talk about with the Liberals, to talk about having a price on carbon and standing up for climate change, but then passing it off to the provinces and only taking it up when the provinces, choose not to. No, we should have leadership and have the carbon tax across the country. But in doing so, we have to work with the provinces, because that would mean a double tax in some areas, some provinces, and that would maybe be too hard for some people to handle. Although having more price on carbon might be better, but we need to understand that we have to look out for our people first, and we don't want a negative aspect towards the carbon tax. So we have to work with the premiers to get the best tax possible. We also need to start transferring away the $60 billion that the oil and gas industry gets and put it into research and development, including green research and development, including a national energy grid.
Great, thank you. Amita, you're next.
Thank you. Honestly, it's depressing to watch the work of so many being ripped away by the next administration when we've been convinced on the whole to vote a different direction. And I think it comes down to that. We're stuck both in Ontario and in other provinces as well, but federally with this back and forth and the instability of the changes of government. So we need to have systems in place that are resilient to those changes, which means to some extent circumventing those being the only methods that we actually have. And I think for this, we need a balance of what I like to call carrot and stick, meaning that we must make it harder for problematic corporations and industries while also providing incentives for change. And at the heart of this is community work to build up our response in spite of government, making sure that we have the connections to both business and labor, so we're working together and indivisible. And so in our communication, also getting past the narrative of environment versus economy. Thank you.
Thank you. Annemie, you're next.
Thanks so much, Mike. And I call this the COVID cover. And I talked about this from the very beginning of the campaign, not just with respect to the environment, but I said that this is one of the reasons that the Green Party was going to need to be a very strong voice during the pandemic, because there was going to be a lot of things happening under the cover of COVID that we didn't want to see in terms of compromising environmental laws, compromising fundamental human rights, and we were going to need to be a strong voice for those who couldn't speak for themselves. And so I believe that absolutely, when you're talking about an existential threat, that is a matter of national interest, it's a matter of national security, and there's no question that the federal government has the right and the obligation to intervene. And we've seen Canadians really celebrate and be really happy to see the various levels of government collaborating and cooperating and putting jurisdiction aside. There's no question when we're talking about the climate emergency that that is what the expectation is going to be going forward.
Thank you. Glenn, you're next.
So our Constitution does matter, and it is difficult for any order of government to act. And I don't care, as my friend Tim Gray from Environmental Defense says, we get into carbon fetishism. Whether you call it fee and dividend, a carbon tax, or cap and trade, the detail is in the design. So what do we actually need nationally? We need a national carbon budget. The federal government can and must limit the amount of emissions. Legislated caps. a capped decline rate. Ontario and Quebec were declining at 4 to 5%. Today, and they were at 20% going to 40% by 2030. Today, we have to be at 80%. We have to be at an 8% reduction to get there. No carbon pricing system is going to do it, and a carbon pricing system also has to do with social equity issues. What we need now are mandates. Mandates on eliminating, taking cars, polluting cars off the road. We've got to replace air travel with high-speed electric rail. We've got to retrofit every building. We're going to have to do that by government mandates the way we did before the Second World War. There is no other way to do it, and only the federal government could do that. And we've got to have a credible plan we can explain to people.
Thanks. Time's up. Courtney, you're up next.
Thank you. So with our 3 levels of government, I think we need to have a plan for whenever one level of government is not getting along with the way we want to go. And so it means we need to be ready to work with the other ones. And so as Dimitri said, you know, the carbon tax that has been brought in nationally, I really support the way that the federal government has enforced that through the courts. So I've been an intervener as part of the intergenerational justice coalition in those court cases, and it's been great to see that so far we've been successful. We need though also to work in a community-based way. So CAPE has had a lot of success in mobilizing communities around the local health benefits of climate action. So we know that the original phase out of coal-fired power plants in Ontario was largely based around a health argument around saying, hey, when there's less air pollution, your kids don't get asthma, we save time in the emergency department, save money. That same argument can be used around traffic-related air pollution. 1/4 of cases in Toronto of new pediatric asthma are due to that. So mobilizing nationally, mobilizing at the community level are things we can do.
Yeah, thanks. And Judy, you're next.
Thank you. First off, we need a plan that's actually going to get us to our targets. The current Paris agreements aren't even close anymore with the rapid escalation of the feedback loops. We need to really look at this as an emergency, which puts it in the realm of the federal government. We need to be working with our citizens and creating better options. I hear over and over, I would drive an electric car if it wasn't twice as expensive as an internal combustion engine. We need to make these choices available to people. We need to give them information that they need. I would love to see carbon labeling on all products that include the cost of transportation in making that product available to them so that they can make better choices and put pressure in the market. But we must be going after the biggest emitters, and we can't be subsidizing their activities, nor should we be putting Canadian taxpayer money into assets that are going to be stranded, such as pipelines. We have to stop digging stuff out of the ground and burning it, and we have to have a plan to make that happen.
Thanks. And Marion, you're last this time. We can't hear you. You are unmuted.
Okay, so again, sorry about the mute and the unmute. So climate action, it's a global problem that requires global solutions. And we need to work together as a team with municipal and provincial governments, as well as indigenous communities and other countries. A Green New Deal would see Canada phase out from fossil fuels by 2030. And it isn't that hard. We have all the tools and technology to do this. We need to create a green federal jobs guarantee that goes hand in hand with a guaranteed livable income, to build new clean energy infrastructure, to retrofit our communities and give everyone access to internet. We also need to invest in caring for people. Jobs in mental health, childcare, and long-term care, they're all green jobs. Investing in strong social safety net and caring for our communities is low carbon work that will lower our emissions and create good quality jobs. And the Green New Deal will make sure that no one is left behind, so that everybody is living in dignity, so we fight climate change together. It's only political will. Thank you.
Thank you. And over to you, Roberta.
Do we have time for rebuttals?
Yes, if you have a rebuttal.
Thanks very much. We have 30 seconds, correct?
That's correct.
Thanks very much, Mike. I just wanted to pick up on Miriam's last point, which I think is excellent. Our climate agenda has to also be a social justice agenda. We have to be the most progressive political party in Canada We have been, we have to stay there. But also, let's be politically smart. I would love, as Green Party leader, to work with Mike Schreiner and Peter Bevan Baker and David Kuhn. Let's form a political alliance. It's possible that as leader of the Greens, I might not become prime minister. That'll free up a lot of time to work politically on the front lines with our allies provincially, and also to form the movement of movements, build from the grassroots activists up. That would be my role as leader. Thank you.
Hands up. I think I saw another rebuttal. Yes, go ahead, Glenn, and then Amita.
So I don't think we're anywhere near realistic. Right now, our emissions are going up dramatically. We have to be much clearer. We have to get to 8% or more. That means ending fossil fuels, totally, subsidies. It means massively funding municipalities. I agree with Courtney. But this has to be a singular priority. We have to be able to work with industry. And no, it's not just a matter of technology, and we have to be something much more specific than talking about a Green Deal, which is ill-defined. We actually need a specific plan in time, and we don't have one.
Thanks, sorry. Amita, you're next.
Thank you. Yes, I think I agree as well. Local governments are on the front lines and the leaders, and we need to empower them. But also, we need multiple concrete trajectories. And yes, the details are incredibly relevant, but we have the expertise to put these together. And at the end of the day, it depends on communication and the relatability of any plan that we put forward, or multiple plans we put forward, to actually connect to every single individual and how it affects their lives. And that comes back to local government and empowering people as well.
Thanks. I think, Enemy, you wanted to rebut, right?
Yes, well, just more to underscore that, you know, the Greens do have a plan. It's mission possible, and there's no question that that plan has to be cutting edge, which means it's fluid. It constantly needs to be adopted to reflect the best new ideas and the best technology, but it does exist. What we really need to be thinking about, because I want to go back to the original question, is what are we prepared to do as federal leaders at the federal level if we don't have cooperation at the provincial level, given how little time we have left to deal with this existential crisis? And it's going to require very novel ideas about how to work with partners that aren't really willing to work with us. We need to put some thought into that as well.
Great, thank you. And Andrew, I believe you put your hand up for rebuttal as well.
Yes, I did. So I wanted to go off of Glenn's point, which I agree with. We need to start transitioning off of oil and gas as soon as possible. So I'm saying we need to start transitioning our $60 billion we put into that industry to research and development. And that includes green energy, and open the door for workers to transition from the oil and gas industry into those sectors. But we need a leader who can win those people over. We need a leader that can talk to people who live in rural Canada and tell them that this is the best way to go. You know, your jobs have done a lot for Canada, but now they're hurting Canada. And if we have a strong economic plan and a leader who can present that economic plan, we will win those people over. And that's me.
Thank you. I believe I saw Courtney put her hand up as well. I think everyone's okay. Courtney, you're next, and then I see your hand, Dimitri. Okay, go ahead, Courtney.
It's good we're all passionate about the climate. I'm happy about that. I wanted to follow up on something Amita said. So when we want to resonate with people, we need to tell stories that are based in evidence that help them figure out what climate change means to them. Climate change is the biggest health threat of the 21st century. Wildfires, asthma exacerbations, Lyme disease, floods, post-traumatic stress disorder, mental health problems, refugee issues. Nobody has put the links together. The CMA did pre-election polling before 2019. People thought climate was super important. They thought health was super important. They hadn't made the links. I briefed multiple ministers who haven't had that other shoe drop. We need to bring that in at the forefront so people understand that climate change is about what your kids are going to eat in 2 decades.
Thank you. Dimitri, I got you, Judy. Miriam.
My turn,
Dimitri,
Mike?
you're next, yes.
Okay, I just want to address this thought that Glenn expressed about the need to work for industry. With all due respect, I think industry is the problem. We know, for example, that Exxon and other oil companies have been misleading the public about the nature and urgency of the climate crisis for decades. What we actually need is a government that is going to impose the public's will on the corporate sector and the billionaire class in order to do what it takes in order to save the future of our children. We need to get away from this idea that industry is part of the solution and understand that industry is core to the inability of our government to achieve this absolutely indispensable and urgent reform in our economic system.
Thank you. Thank you. Judy.
We really have to go after those corporations that are engaging in predatory practices that will result in ecocide. We have to be hard hitting on that. But we have this unique opportunity right now in a very short window where people are listening to the scientists because of COVID-19. We need to show them that they need to listen to the climate scientists as well, so that we get people realizing that, yes, we can have major lifestyle changes that move us in the direction of keeping us all safe. People want to know what we are going to do for them.
Oh, I think you muted yourself, Judy.
It did it on its own, my gosh. People want to know what is electrical gremlins. People want to know what our policies will do for them. We have to change our languaging so we're talking in the language that people are receptive to hearing.
Well, thanks. Thank you. Miriam, you're next.
Green New Deal, it's a bunch of bold ideas to tackle climate change while at the core of it all, there's decolonization and social justice. It's the only option we have. We have to rethink our economy. Everything is going wrong, and a Green New Deal is a solution. Thank you.
Thank you. Glenn wants to use his second rebuttal.
Yeah, we used to have 15 seconds if we're singled out, but this to me is a pivotal point. I've worked with industry for last 10 years who are reducing by 15%. We're not talking Exxon. We're talking concrete companies that are now producing carbon neutral concrete. We're talking about steel mills that now have converted to 100% recovered steel. We're talking about the clean sector. So Dimitri, when you want to pick a fight with Jerry Dias, who's one of the most progressive labor leaders who I know you disagree with, and Green Blue, there is no way we're going to get there. And those folks who are arguing that somehow we have to have a full-on war with capitalism and solve the climate change problem, it's just not working that way. Look at Norway, look at California. I think that's a very dangerous way to go.
Yes. Okay, Dimitri wants to use his second rebuttal.
Yeah, I think the proof is in the pudding, Glenn. You know, we've been trying to work with industry for decades, and where has that gotten us? We're on the verge of a climate catastrophe. It is absolutely clear that the government has to be forceful in imposing its will. The overall result is catastrophic, and the time for fearless corporate action against the corporate sector is now. It's Jerry Dias, by the way, who's picking a fight with the climate movement, contrary to the interests of Canadian workers. It's not me who's looking for a fight. He almost blew up the NDP just because they wanted to have a discussion about the LEAP manifesto, and then he supported Trudeau in the last election, who, as we know, bought Trans Mountain in violation of his promise to deal with the climate emergency. So he's the one who's picking a fight with the climate movement.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, Roberta. Oh, Courtney wants to use her second one. You're going to use your rebuttals on the first question. Go ahead, Courtney.
One of the advisors on my campaign is the deputy mayor of Yellowknife, and he's also a small business owner who's incorporated. So he just reminded me to make sure we don't paint all corporations with the same lens. I really respect Dimitri's knowledge about corporate affairs and learned from him last week, actually, that we don't actually request nearly enough information in terms of our lobbying meetings. We know that right now, fossil fuel lobbyists get about 5 meetings for every one that federal decision makers take with someone from the environmental NGO sector. These are things we can change. We can make that time a public good, force a 1-to-1 ratio, make sure everybody submits their materials. There's ways that we can find a middle ground.
Thank you. Okay, I'm going to hand it over to Roberta for the second question. Roberta, you'll need to unmute.
Thank you. This one is about how each of you will perform on the international stage. As the leader of the Green Party, you will stand on this international stage and address issues of foreign relations and policy on behalf of our party and Canadians. Give us a look at how you intend to deal with international issues. And we will start with, let's start with Courtney.
Thank you. So one of the roles that I'm taking a leave of absence from to run in this race is as actually head of advocacy for the World Health Organization Civil Society Working Group on Climate Change and Health. I've spent much of my energy over the last 3 to 4 years on the international stage. I was the international policy coordinator for the Lancet Countdown on Health and Climate Change, which is the world's biggest research collaborative. So that meant that I worked with doctors from China, from India, from the UK, from Australia, from Brazil, and more, as well as with Doctors Without Borders, to produce policy briefs tailored to those organizations. I represented the Voice of Health, was honored to at the launch of the Powering Past Coal Alliance several years ago at COP. Je parle français. I'm used to representing organizations at that level, and I feel I could do a good job on behalf of the Green Party.
Thank you. Dimitri.
Months ago or weeks ago, we lost a bid for the second time running to win a seat on the UN Security Council. And I think that that speaks volumes to the ways in which our credibility on the international stage has been degraded. And the number one reason for that, in my opinion, is our extraordinary deference to the agenda of the United States government. Several months before he was assassinated, Martin Luther King said that the United States government is the greatest purveyor of violence in the world. I believe that's truer even today than it was then. Iraq lies in smoking ruins because of US aggression. Libya has been destroyed. Afghanistan is a wreck. All around the world, we are seeing a US policy that is not serving the interests of the American people, not serving the interests of people generally. And we need to chart a new course, be truly independent, develop alliances with non-belligerent states, and apply universally human rights and international law, not make exceptions for America's friends, but actually say that all human rights violators, all violators of international law will be treated equally.
Thank you. Judy.
Thank you. You know, just as we have our core green principles for our basic underpinnings for all of our policies, I think we need to use basic human rights as our core policy when we're dealing internationally. And we have to clean up our own backyard. One of the reasons we didn't win that seat in the UN was because of our track record of not following through after inquiries such as the Peace and Reconciliation, our UNDRIP, as well as the missing and murdered Indigenous women. We need to clean that up. We need to take action. But we need to be equitable. When it is determined that a country is taking actions that is not in line with basic human rights, if we decide on sanctions for that country, we must also apply those sanctions to other countries that are in similar situations. No more friends and family discounts based on trading agreements. And we absolutely must stop allowing our trading agreements to be set up so that foreign countries or corporations can sue Canada and taxpayers have to pay for it. Thank you.
Thank you. Andrew, you're up.
Canada was once a leader on the international stage, and we can be so again. One of the things that we should start doing, which is Green Party policy, is to reestablish the Canadian International Development Agency and make sure that we're giving proper foreign aid to those who need it. And along those same lines, make sure that we work with other nations on achieving the UN Sustainable Development Goals. We also need to make sure that we up our game in the peacekeeping sector, which is what we've had before. We need to have an increase in military, more support for military, and make sure that they're actually doing the job of peacekeeping that Canada was once so famously known for. We also need to make sure that we have trade agreements that are fair and doesn't jeopardize our sovereignty. We also need to take a strong stand against nations who violate human rights abuses. I've worked with Amnesty International for over a year, and this is an extremely important cause for me. These are all things that Canada is achievable of doing if they just have the right political will. And we can do that with the right political leaders.
Thank you. Amita.
Thank you. I think this, of course, comes down, like everything, to our core green values. But also for me, it relates to my perspective as an astrophysicist. After spending so many years with my head stuck in a black hole light years away, I look back at our planet like that pale blue dot in our home. And therefore, I see human rights as needing to be our focus because everyone else we're here with are my family, and that goes for our other families as well, in plants and animals. And in this, therefore, I always try to separate regimes from people and have compassion for every individual. So for this, I think we need to be looking at opening up immigration, preparing for climate refugees, and not being hypocritical when it comes to application of human rights at home and all the work we have to do on decolonization. Another really important piece is working on economic self-sufficiency and resilience to strengthen our position, and as well looking at economic opportunities so that we can be a trusted leader when it comes to technology, as we are with aerospace, and have a leg up there. Thank you.
Thank you. Miriam.
Okay, Canada's foreign policy should be independent from the political interests of the US, and social and environmental justice must be at the core. We need to cut ties with mining interests at home and abroad and stop selling arms, including uranium, one of the deadliest raw materials in the world. We must focus on peacekeeping and social and economic well-being of all people affected by Canadian foreign policies. We must place economic and political sanctions on any state to fight human rights violations, including those of China, Saudi Arabia, and Israel. We must be a leader in fighting oppression in all its forms. Canada must also take responsibility for its role in the climate crisis. We are one of the world's highest emitters and as well as exporters of greenhouse gases. Even though it is shameful, it gives us hope that if Canada acted without the support of any other country, we could still bring some real change. We must be leaders, not followers.
Thank you. Glenn?
So the world is not a black and white place. The province of British Columbia has one project alone that will increase Canadian emissions by 9.6 megatons. To simply treat labor in the corporate world as the enemy is extremely problematic, especially in Canada. Hundreds of thousands of people's jobs depend on companies like Glencore, who are pioneering the first electric mine in the world here, pioneering breakthrough technology. Our concrete industry is leading the world in carbon cure, a Canadian technology that makes concrete production neutral. Our steel industry, our four most successful steel mills in Ontario, are running on recovered materials. I had a large part to do with that. And that was working with business and labor, working with the Toby Heaps, working with the Katie Sullivans and the Tom Rands, who are business leaders. What we're saying today is alienating those people, creating insecurity in their jobs, and oversimplifying the politics of this. And we can't afford to do it. I took on Syngenta, Monsanto, and Bayer to introduce the first reduction in systemic neurotoxic pesticides and organized it in 17 other jurisdictions. Experience matters here.
Thank you. Annemie?
Thank you. So back to the question, and it's true, experience does matter. I was overseas working in Canada's mission to the EU in Brussels, and working in the International Criminal Court and directing EU operations for an international conflict prevention NGO when I saw Canada's role in the world diminish. And I can tell you that people miss us, that the global community misses us and misses our leadership, and is needed more than ever. And so here are just a few top notes, because it's a very big topic. We're a middling country, which means that it has disadvantages, but also opportunities. We can lead by example on a number of issues, the climate emergency being number one on that list, by first getting our own house in order. We can lead by modeling diversity. We can also make sure that we are the champions against the erosion of human rights abroad, which is happening under what I call COVID cover. And we can make sure that we are always trading with honor, which means that we are not entering into or supporting agreements or building our economic success on the backs of other people in other places in the world.
Thank you. And David.
Thank you, Roberta. I'd love to see a Canada that's leading the world again, leading the world on taking on the #1 problem facing human civilization, which is the global climate emergency. And we won't be able to take on the world unless we're leading by example, and we are not leading by example right now. But I also think that as Green Party leader, what I need to do is focus on the essentials, and that's about winning seats in Canada. So what I would do is build on this fantastic team here. And our #1 player on the international stage is Elizabeth May. She's the rock star. Let's get her out there working on the international issues, forming alliances with the global Greens. She's been doing it all her life, and let's rally behind her. And let's put Courtney Howard in all the health conferences, and Amita in all the green science conferences, and use all the incredible knowledge that we have around our party to build. I have lots of experience here. I worked in international human rights for 10 years here at Ministry of Attorney General in BC, but it's for others to do this work because the leader needs to focus on winning seats.
Thank you. All right, Mike, it's your turn again.
Oh, we have a rebuttal over.
We do.
Thank you. I just want to address something that I think is really important, and that is division, both right here and also reflected internationally. I have traditionally been the friend that ends fights. I've done this many times in my life in extremely sticky, difficult situations. And I can do it with world leaders and within the party. And I hope that where this ends up is us on the same page working together, and then we can bring that reflection back to the rest of the world. Thanks.
Thank you. Do we have any other rebuttals? Anami?
Yes, thank you very much. Just again, because it's a big topic and one that I think is very important. I think it's very important to remember that when we are being good international members of the international community, it's really very good for us. This is something that the Greens understand intuitively, and again, why it's so important to have us at the table. We understand that cooperation, working multilaterally is going to be a very big part of how we exit from all of these global challenges. And I would say, Amita, that I believe that it's very healthy to have a healthy debate as long as it's done respectfully, and so far so good, I think, tonight.
I think so far so good too. Anybody else? David?
Thank you. I want to pick up on Amita's point as well. They are exactly right. I think unity is critical to this race. My career in the Ministry of Attorney General and at the Department of Justice in Ottawa was about dispute resolution. I was Executive Director of the Dispute Resolution Office here in BC, and worked as Executive Director of the Dispute Resolution Office in Ottawa too. And what I believe is that we identify our common interests, and there are so many common interests in this group of leadership candidates, and if we can build internationally and build at home as well, we can transform Canadian politics. Let's build a movement of movements, pull together all the groups that support us. Thank you.
Anyone else? All right, Mike?
Thanks, Roberta. So the current Ontario government is pinning a lot of its economic hopes on natural resource development in the north, including mineral development in the Ring of Fire and increased logging in the boreal forests. What role do you see the federal government playing in such major developments? How can you ensure that they're done responsibly in partnership with First Nations and in a way that does not perpetuate environmental racism? And Judy, you're first this time.
Absolutely great questions. We have to really start moving away from a resource-based economy across Canada. Those natural resources, such as our trees, are the most efficient technological that we have for sequestering climate greenhouse gases. So we need to be looking at maintaining our ecological base as being the ground upon which we build. But there needs to be transition away from these natural resources in an equitable manner, such as the uranium mines. Really, we need to stop exporting things that are dangerous to people and to the planet. And we need to be looking at using our resources in ways that are different than what we have before. It really is a cultural shift. I really like the donut economic model, where we look at the carrying capacity of the earth, and those actions are risking getting us past the carrying capacity, then we can't do them. We have to look at different ways of doing things.
Thank you. Glenn, you're next.
So yes, I think we have to shift away from a resource extraction economy to a resource recovery economy. which means you'll have to get business to behave differently. So the first thing the federal government could do if you wanted to shut a lot of that really wrong-headed development down is stop funding it. Most of those projects are hugely dependent on federal dollars. Number two is change the economics of it. I agree with Judy. We have enough aluminum right now in our landfills in Quebec and Ontario to supply the entire smelter. Aluminum is perpetually reprocessable. We exploit people in Jamaica. Part of the environmental racism comes from resource extraction that Canadians do around the world. If we just took, just as one example, and I could give you many, if we made aluminum out of recovered aluminum, it would take 80% less energy, immediately cutting aluminum production's greenhouse gas emissions by 80%. And it would reduce by about 80% the input costs of materials and provide a reliable market for municipalities and companies and create huge amounts of money to pay people better and to reinvest and use Canadian technology. That's the relationship we need to have with business. Constructive, recognize it's international, confront racism, and create winning partnership.
Thank you. Dimitri, you're next.
I think that these extractive projects tend to happen more often than they should because the public feels, and understandably so, that their ability to access decent employment is dependent upon the private sector. What we need to do is to use the massive spending power of the federal government to create jobs in the renewable energy industry, to create jobs in retrofitting buildings, to create jobs in reclamation. You know, Avi Lewis and Reagan Boychuk have written eloquently about the whole notion of a reclamation jobs boom, and that is taking funds from the polluters and investing them in remediating our lands to a natural and healthy state. And in addition, you know, we've learned in this pandemic, when the government has been preaching to us for years, the notion that we have to abide slavishly to the principle of balanced budgets, that in fact we have the ability to summon hundreds of billions of dollars of revenue to deal with a national emergency. There is no greater emergency today than the climate crisis, and we should deploy every dollar at our disposal in order to deal effectively with that crisis and creating the employment that will stop people from feeling as though they need jobs from the extractive sector to have a decent life.
Yeah, yep, thank you. David, you're next.
Thank you. I agree with what's been said before, but I would also just like to add a couple of things. Even in the boreal forest, we have huge jurisdiction for the federal government, not just over the environment, but over navigable waters and the fish. And we need to exercise that jurisdiction. We need to make sure that these developments are covered by investments in trust funds so that it's not the taxpayers who are paying for the reclamation of these lands once they've been mined, but it's the corporations themselves. We need to make sure that polluters pay their full way in these kinds of developments. And we must really ensure that Indigenous people are at the table right from the start of the planning. And the federal government has a huge role in this. They have huge levers, and we should be pulling on those levers hard. Indigenous people say nothing about us without us, and it's the federal government's role to ensure that Indigenous communities are at the table, and also to ensure that the benefits flow locally. They don't flow to the foreign multinationals, they flow locally into our local communities, especially our Indigenous communities, given the history of exploitation of those communities. Thank you.
Thank you. Amita, you're next.
Thank you. I agree also with a lot of what has been said, and especially the changing the narrative of what is needed and the idea that the only option for employment and work and jobs and progress or prosperity comes from these projects, and changing rather to a focus on equity, not seeing it as a trade-off, and of course, unfunding the projects. But when it comes to decolonization, I think that's the core. If you actually want to get rid of environmental racism and other worries there and other prejudices and marginalizations. And that needs to be looked at broadly, starting from within. And for the projects in particular, UNDRIP is a good starting point. Free, prior, and informed consent, of course. But also, it's not quite good enough when these are the only options that are provided for economic development. But in that too, there's a further narrative to talk about nation to nation, host nations, and sovereignty. And really, it comes down to giving people the freedom of choice of where they go with their economies from here. Thank you.
Thank you. Andrew, you're next.
So resources are very important to the provincial governments. A lot of funds are raised for their projects from the resource development industry. So we need to work with provincial governments on the best way to do that. For example, we could, again, go back to strengthening our Environmental Protection Act and the Navigable Water Protection Act. That's federal jurisdiction, and those are things that we can do right away. But we do need to work with our provinces. The Green Party has been great at that, from campaigning on making sure that Nestle doesn't take water from our rivers and lakes at pennies on the dollar. We've also talked about the Ring of Fire. If they're going to do some mining up there, then maybe I could at least refine it here in Ontario. That's something I know Mike and the Green Party of Ontario has talked about, as well as using large timber, reusing large timber to rebuild homes, for example. So there's ways that we can push forward the resource extraction industry, but reduce it at the same time by making the most benefit of it economically here in Ontario. And yes, of course, working with the First Nations, making sure they benefit from this is extremely important.
Thank you. Miriam, you're next.
The solution is a Green New Deal built hand in hand with Indigenous communities as equal. We need to work and invest in Indigenous communities and improve services, guaranteed livable income, green federal jobs guarantee. We'll also make sure that Indigenous communities are not relying on corporations and instead are offered dignified jobs and living conditions. It is disgraceful that in Canada, there are Indigenous communities who do not have access to clean water, drinking water, or food security. We also need to make sure that Indigenous communities have access to the internet and that they have access to high quality education and healthcare. We need to invest in Indigenous knowledge. Indigenous folks live on the front lines of climate change and have been adapting to this new reality for years. They have cared for the lands and they're not included in the decision-making process. We need to invest in their knowledge at the end. And the government has to take the lead because corporations will not. And we have seen that because look at this horrible mess that we have created from colonialism. Thank you.
Thank you. Courtney, you're next.
Thank you. So I agree with many here that we need to take a step back and help Canadians reimagine who we are in our place in the world. We need a well-being economy. We need a reclamation economy. We need to help people understand that we're going to be a lifeboat for the world as increasing climate change makes crops very difficult to grow, water scarce, and many other parts of the world. We need to keep this place clean. And I find living in the North that people have this sort of vague idea that it's real big and nobody lives there. And the reality is that there are many people here. One of the biggest toxic sites in Canada is not far from me. It's $1 billion cleanup that is now in taxpayers. We're paying for it because the company went bankrupt. The first motion I ever brought to the Canadian Medical Association General Council was to ask them to support increased peer-reviewed studies into the local health impacts of the oil sands. Those studies, it caused a giant kerfuffle. We had a big debate. It made national headlines. I ended up winning, but those studies have still not been done. We don't fund the research to give people the data to create the argument to stand up against industry, and we need to start to do that.
Thank you. Anami, you're last this time.
Okay, thanks, Mike. I think it's incredibly negligent that our provinces continue to allow so much of our economies to be reliant on resource extraction. Considering that the world is headed in a different direction, we're just not preparing ourselves for the future. And it's very unfair for people in rural and remote communities to be vilified and criticized for taking the jobs that are available to them when we haven't invested in the infrastructure, the educational facilities, and all of the other things that are needed for there to be real diversity in opportunities for employment. And so this is going to be one of the best opportunities we will ever have to make that right. And that's what we're talking about, making it right through the stimulus that is going to come as we emerge from the pandemic. And so that's what we should be using it for. In terms of environmental racism and Indigenous rights, I ask everyone to join me tomorrow at 6:30 when I speak with Russell Coy about exactly those things. Black people, Indigenous peoples, low-income peoples have to be the ones making the decisions. You can't. There is no one else that is able to make them for them, or we would have had change already.
Thank you. I do see Andrew would like to have a rebuttal.
Yes, you were waving wildly while I was talking.
What's that? I didn't hear that. Anyway, it's not even so much a rebuttal, actually. It's something that really hasn't been addressed too much in this, and it kind of plays into this question is about agriculture. We need to strongly support our farmers across Canada, and one of the ways that we can do that is to try to find incentives or a subsidy for them to plant carbon neutral products. So products that actually absorb carbon. They'll be doing a service by planting these products, and they're also the ones that are helping us grow our food. So this is something that we really need to pay more attention to. And I'm glad that the Green Party of Ontario takes up this mantle strongly. Green Party of Canada needs to do it as well.
Thank you. Amita would like to do a rebuttal.
Thank you. Yes, I just want to briefly talk about an issue that we see often in these conversations, not particularly here tonight, but in general, about otherizing. We talk about communities in groups, and it's really important to make sure that people feel like they have agency, or people actually have agency, and addressing what fundamentally makes that not what we have in our society. And this is related to Indigenous sovereignty, the experiences of BIPOC communities, and more broadly for all communities in making sure that they have a choice in how they build their future and we change our economy. Thanks.
Thank you. Glenn would like to have a rebuttal.
There's one point where we're divided, and I'm on one side. The federal government, as part of COVID, put $1.7 billion to clean up orphan wells in Alberta. There is about $100 billion in liabilities from oil and gas companies that haven't cleaned up their tailings ponds in that. I can't understand how some folks in our party can support that. $1.7 billion could provide clean water and energy to every Indigenous First Nations community almost in Canada. It could solve the food security problems in the north and school children. We have to get tougher. We have to be clearer, because we're sending a lot of mixed messages as a party. So I'd like those of you who are supporting the $1.7 billion orphan well program to rethink that, because First Nations people are still waiting for that. Thanks.
Thank you. Miriam would like to do rebuttal.
Amy, when you were the Green Party of Canada's foreign affairs critic, you did not condemn the coup against Evo Morales, an indigenous elected leader in Bolivia. I was wondering, how do you justify talking about letting indigenous communities take their own decisions and decolonization, and then endorse colonialism or imperialism in another country? Thank you.
Thanks. That's a lot of very incendiary language there. As I said, I'm an international human rights lawyer. I've worked in conflict prevention. My husband actually worked in the office of the first Indigenous Vice President of Bolivia. And he accompanied Evo Morales on a trip and interviewed him while he was there. So I can tell you, no one is a bigger supporter of the rights of Indigenous peoples in Bolivia than I am. But I'm also someone who is a foreign policy expert, and I'm nuanced. And I can tell you that I go to excellent sources for information. I want to see an election as soon as possible. I want to make sure that it's free and fair. And let's try to be a little more careful with our language.
Thank you. David would like to use his last one, I believe. Yes.
Thank you, Michael. I want to pick up on a couple of points. The point Glenn made earlier, I think we really do need to be careful in our language in the Green Party. I'm a native Albertan born in Edmonton, and I think one of the things we need to look at is how do we switch from the not left, not right language that we used in our last campaign and to much more hopeful, positive, forward-looking. Let's talk about where we're going to go as a country and build together. We need a uniter for our country as well as for our party. Thank you.
Thank you. Dimitri, last one.
So not sure to whom Glenn was referring, but in case it was me, I don't support a $1.7 billion, I just want to be clear what my position is, a reclamation plan. In fact, the number is not $100 billion. It's, according to a leaked estimate of the AER, it's over $200 billion. That should come from the industry. And I've been to Fort Chipewyan, and I've seen how the toxic tar sands tailings ponds are affecting Indigenous peoples in Northern Alberta. And I think that they would be the first persons in our country to benefit from the reclamation of these lands.
Thank you. So I think given the time, and we've already used 3, sorry. Yes. Oh, Courtney, you do have one left. I saw your hand. So do you want to use it?
Sure, I'm conscious of the time, but I did want to say with regards to the orphan well, oil and gas well problem, yes, polluters should pay. And in fact, they haven't yet quite decided on how at least some of that money is going to be rolled out. So what Reagan Boychuk is hoping for, who's really advocated for this, is to use that to leverage extra money from companies. And so if we can seed some money to help with that cleanup, that I think is ideal. And we need to get it started while there's still some money in the oil sands, or they're gonna leave, just like what happened with our big gold mine here, and it's all gonna be in the public pocket. And unfortunately what happens, especially in regionalized communities, is it never gets cleaned up.
Thank you. Okay, in the interest of time, we're going to move to closing statements. And everyone, I believe, has 1 minute for your closing statement. And Andrew, we'll have you begin.
So I have given so much of the last 6 or so years to the Green Party. I mean, it really has been my life. Like, I don't just go to AGMs, you know, when I hear there's an opportunity. I go to build communities. I've gone to AGMs all over the place because it's important. I want to know more about Greens. And I know that we can build this party with the right platform. You know, just for example, like, I gave up, as I said earlier, I gave up starting this fundraising to campaign for the Green Party in Orleans. And on that note, if you could, for part of that reason, if you could start to donate to some of our campaigns, we would really appreciate it. Like, if everyone on this call gave $100 to mine, for example, and I've been promoting all the candidates, for example, but now I'm going to kind of narrow it down to me and Judy. I'm going to give her some love. If you could donate $100 to campaign, we would raise our fundraising goals. And that all goes towards the Green Party to build a stronger campaign. And exactly, that's the type of leader I am. I want to make sure we all get on the ballot because this is an important election.
Thank you. Thanks. Amitair is next.
Thank you. And thank you everybody for coming and being here today. And thank you, Mike and Roberta. I think we have such an amazing opportunity to grow as a party, and we can be the ones to inspire and unite the country toward a concrete vision and a collective dream of an ecologically wise future. And do so by listening to a scientist that knows how to communicate science and when to go around it. We're having a wonderful time building this movement, and we invite you to join us. As some of the young people in my campaign said, we are building a movement that is diverse, just, and inclusive, and a place of belonging and hope. Please check out my website, amitakutner.ca, to connect with me or join us. And while you're there, please do consider helping me get on the ballot in October by nominating and donating to my campaign. And as Greens right now, it's all of our responsibility to grow this movement, spread the word, sign up your friends. There is no better time than now to get involved. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Judy is next.
Thank you. Thank you, Mike and Roberta and the whole staff that's here as well, who've been doing all of these amazing opportunities for us to get out and meet Greens across Canada. I'm almost sad that this is the last one of these, but we do have many more. Check out the events pages on all of our websites. There's lots more upcoming that you can join. You know, a couple of things I really want to do, because we need to grow Greens, we have to get outside of our silos and connect with one another. I want a mentorship program for existing well-established EDAs to be able to mentor the new up-and-coming EDAs. I want to see a twinning program where Canadian EDAs are twinned with EDAs in other countries. We have a global movement. Greens are elected in 80 countries around the world. We need to be learning from each other. We need a process and structure that allows us to do that. We need to be working together. You know, I'm the leader who would be able to pull us together, to unify us, to give this structure, and to move us in the direction that we want to move on the world stage to get us elected. Thank you. JudyandGreen.com.
Thank you. Dimitri is next.
Il est maintenant clair que la cause principale de la crise du climat, c'est notre système économique. Pour résoudre cette crise, il faut absolument que nous créions une nouvelle économie qui priorise le peuple et la planète et pas la richesse des milliardaires. In order to deal effectively with the climate crisis, we have to understand that the core cause of that crisis, as Naomi Klein has argued so eloquently, is our economic system, a system that puts profits before people and the planet. Any real effort to resolve that crisis will require us to transform our economy away from the one that got us into this mess. Please check out my platform on the question of the economy, workers' rights, and the reform of the justice system, all of which is aimed towards that end. I'll be in Ottawa this weekend, meeting with Greens there. You can learn more about our campaign by visiting our website, teamdimitri.ca. It's been a pleasure, as always, speaking with my colleagues in this leadership race. Have a good night.
Thank you. David is next.
Thank you, Mike. Thank you, everybody who organized this debate. Roberta, Aaron, Vicky, really appreciate everybody coming together. What I offer is 4 things. First, I've campaigned from coast to coast on Megan Mitten's campaign in New Brunswick, Mike Schreiner's campaign in Guelph, Paul Manley's campaign for weeks and weeks in his by-election win. We need a leader who loves to campaign, knows the Green Party inside and out, and has done it. On a besoin d'un candidat qui est parfaitement capable de faire campagne dans les 2 langues officielles, de connecter avec le monde, dans l'Est de l'Ontario, au Québec, au Nouveau-Brunswick, en Nouvelle-Écosse. It's essential to have a leader who's not learning on the job when it comes to being perfectly bilingual. Third, we need a leader who really understands the Green Party in his, her, or their bones. I've served in 2 positions on shadow cabinet with Elizabeth May, justice critic and democratic reform critic. I understand our strengths and our weaknesses, how we build on the strengths and how we address our weaknesses. davidmerner.com is my website. Thank you.
Thank you. Annemie is next.
I'm coming to you from the traditional territories of the Mississauga, Anishinaabe, Haudenosaunee, and Huron-Wendat with a great deal of pride. C'était un vrai plaisir d'être parmi vous ce soir et je m'excuse de ne pas avoir fait mes introductions en français tout au début, mais je le fais maintenant. I'm very proud to have run in Ontario in the last election. The thing I'm most proud of are the number of Greens that I was able to support, that I was able to help build capacity with, and the number of those Greens who are now working on our campaign. I believe that the Green Party is the party that is going to be most needed as we confront the chance of a lifetime to convert our economy into a truly green economy as quickly as possible. But we need to be prepared to seize that opportunity. We're going to do that by being the most diverse, democratic, and daring party in Canadian politics. I hope that I've given you some of the reasons this evening why I'm the person to help make that vision happen. Please sign our petitions for Emancipation Day against police use of force. Please join Marcel and I tomorrow for our discussion on why Emancipation Day needs to become a national day. Thank you.
Thank you. Miriam is next.
Thank you to everyone who made tonight possible, and well done to the Green Party of Canada staff. It has been a town hall marathon. Also, thank you to Mike and Roberta for facilitating tonight. We all know as Greens that what it is like to hear people tell us that our plans are naive, too ambitious, or too expensive. They know that we are right, but they do not have the courage to act. My generation is facing extinction. We have a few years to act and determine our future on this planet. Governments and corporations deny how urgently we need to clean this mess up, because if they did, they would accept responsibility for what they have done. This mess is their fault. They say that we can't afford to act, but their terrible policies and their inaction have made this an emergency. We have no other choice, but we can do one thing. We can fight for a Green New Deal. We are the solution. And if I'm the next leader, I will do everything it takes to make sure that my generation has a future on this planet and that no one is left behind. We need to fight for social justice, decolonization, and bold climate action. It is time for political courage, and it is time for a Green New Deal. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Glenn is next.
So I think we need a leader that can take us from the 4% we are in the polls right now to accessing the vast majority of the 1 in 3 Canadians who right now are actively thinking about Greens, who have been voting for other parties, who are in their hearts Greens. We have to have consistency. $1.7 billion going to the oil and gas and tar sands to clean up a mess and not securing any serious regulatory reform that caused the problem. With the most publicly subsidized companies in Canada, highly profitable companies with billions of dollars in subsidies is just wrong. That $1.7 billion should go to Indigenous people for starts. I've been tough on companies. We introduced cap systems and pricing systems in Ontario that brought carbon monoxide, NOx and SOx down by 45%. GHGs were down 20%, the steepest reductions in Canada, because I was tough but practical with companies. We need a leader who can work in the reality of the economy, because we don't have time to reinvent it in the next 10 years entirely, and we have to shift it to a circular economy from a linear economy. I think I bring that value proposition to this party, and I'm looking forward to working with you. Thank you.
Thank you. Courtney is next.
Thank you. So I'm running to be the leader of the Green Party of Canada because I believe we're living at a moment of greater vulnerability and opportunity than at any other point of our adult lives. We need to solve the pandemic, its economic fallout, and climate change in the next few years. I believe, from having spent the pandemic at the bedside with Canadians in their anxiety, in their struggle, that what people are looking for is a clear, evidence-based, action-oriented path towards a healthy future, to keep food on the table for them now with a universal basic income, and to provide a stable ecological underpinning that will keep food on the table for their kids into the future. I have led a international movement in terms of planetary health. I've built an NGO across Canada. I'm in demand as a public speaker. I love evidence-based policy and bringing the best from people. I think the party needs a compassionate or action-oriented voice, and I believe I can provide that. Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you to each and every one of the contestants. The Green Party of Canada is strong with leadership contestants like all of you. And we're also strong with so many of the participants have stayed on. I've been in so many Zoom calls where people drop off towards the end, and I'm so impressed by how many people are still on this particular part of this town hall, which says a lot about the contestants, and it says a lot about the energy in our party. I also want to thank Aaron and Vicky for your amazing work, and the entire GPC staff and team. I have to give a shout out to Candace, a member of my staff, who got me here and made sure Roberta and I were organized. And Roberta, it's a real honor to work with you in Ontario and to co-moderate this event with you. I don't know if you want to say any final words, but I want to say thank you. Be well, wear a mask, save lives.
Thank you to everyone.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Roberta. Thank you, Mike, for those words. And just building on what Mike said, I've noticed some participants have been coming back night after night for more of these town halls. So thanks for sticking with us. As someone mentioned, it's been a marathon, but I'm really glad that we've had the opportunity for all these Green members to get to know our fantastic leadership contestants, even if we don't get to meet in person. There's just over a month left to become a member so that you can vote in the contest. So if you aren't yet a member, or if you have friends or family who might want to join so that they can vote, make sure that they sign up before September 3rd. Thanks so much, everyone, again, and have a great night. If you want to learn more, make sure to go to the leadership contest page on the Green Party website so that you can find some way of supporting these great people. Take care.